Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 2 of The High Ground, where we're talking about the Pacific Northwest. We're talking about markets, retirement behavior, and how we can invest for the long game. Welcome. Well, we made it to episode 2.
We made it to episode two. A long road. Yeah, we got a lot going on today. We got Google now in the Dow. We got inflation prints that recently came out and its impact. And we're also going to talk about the odds of being struck by lightning today. So that's a fun local segment here. But yeah, to kick things off, Google added to the Dow. I think it's one of those market headlines that older generations get really excited about.
Mhm.
But I think it also sounds maybe more important than it actually is in reality. I think Google replacing Verizon ultimately is more of a commentary about the evolution of the US economy, where the Dow is 30 companies, price weighted, um, and it's a shift of who is the biggest and most expensive company out there. I think it's been a long time coming, and maybe it doesn't make as much of an economical impact as it would be if a company, say, we talked about SpaceX last week,
Yes.
is added to other indexes. Part of the reason why is like most people talk about the Dow as being the quote market, but there's actually very few investments that track the Dow itself. Uh, Based off of my research, I could only find one ETF that tracks the Dow itself, which the market value of that fund is about 3 billion, and that's compared to nearly 16 trillion invested in S&P 500 funds. So
Yeah, not close.
not even close, not even close. But n noteworthy, to say the least. Andrew, when you think about when people talk about the market, where is that age line in the sand in your mind of like people like if they are age X and over, you know that they're
Yeah.
talking about the Dow. If they're younger than that age, they're probably talking about other indexes.
I feel like that if your experience with tracking markets is strictly related to Jim Cramer, then you're probably connected to the Dow. And if not, then maybe you're thinking more S&P. Let's throw that around like 60, 65. How
All
about
right,
that?
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Although a bit, I think in general, big news. I think noteworthy, probably more less about Google and more about Verizon. And just a
Hmm.
good reminder that Verizon once one of the more successful companies in the United States. Like not every company remains at the top for a long time. So just wanted to share that as I know that crossed people's news feeds this week.
Yeah, I feel like that when we're looking at different indexes and just what quote unquote the market is, and being able to say, okay, even though, from a market cap weighting perspective, like S&P 500 is where people are going to. Even still, I feel like that using like the S&P 1500, or when we look at ETFs like VTI or ITOT, like those two specifically have added SpaceX,
Mhm.
even at really small weightings. I think it's around like 0.15%. Like those are when we're saying, hey, let's see like the breadth of the market and like how it's performing in whole. I feel like that's where you and I are going to when we're talking to clients.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Although I think there's times when like I want to get a little nuanced and I'm like, okay, what's the broad market doing? And so looking at something like the Russell 3000, which
Yeah.
is the 3,000 biggest companies as opposed to just the 500 biggest or price weighted top 30. So, but yeah, I think it's a good thing to note in the back of our minds as we're thinking about evolution of companies.
Some fun charts we can throw in the show notes too. Well, it's like when we think like I remember this was really popular coming out of 2020 is like the equal weight
Yeah.
too, where people, I mean, this is we'll talk more about stocks that have done really well over the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, that's the beauty of market cap weighting that people have experienced as we think about like
Mhm.
Magnificent Seven and these big names that have like Nvidia, Amazon, and et cetera. uh, People have benefited from that growth, where equal weight has underperformed that over the last, 5, 6 years or so, because it's just taken those 500 names and we're going to split it evenly across there. So I
Yeah.
think that when we've had some conversations with folks have been like, gosh, I just feel like that if I get into those top 7 names, I'm over allocated towards specific sectors. That may be the case, but that's done pretty well over the last few years.
Yeah, it absolutely has. There's definitely a Darwinistic approach to that, right? Where it's like the survival of the fittest, where you're going to own the biggest and
Yes.
best companies as those go up compared to the equal weighted, where it's just here are the 500 biggest, and I'm going to own an equal percentage across the board. So, I think the note there is like not all indexes are created equal.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so whether
So I think
you're a
that,
Russell 3000 guy like myself or
mm.
a Dow if you're the 65 plus crew, but it's great. Andrew, what else do you got? What else is newsworthy this week?
Okay, we got some inflation prints. We're looking at a chart here where we can see PCE versus core PCE. As a reminder, PCE stands for Personal Consumption Expenditures. And so when we're looking at this blue line here and saying, okay, inflation up 4.1% over the last month, that was the number that came out in May compared to so that's going to include things like food and energy. So think of oil, right? You can see that war in Iran impact compared to 3.4% where we're taking those things out. So, when we're having, I mean, I feel like that the most common conversation I'm having with people where it's like, hey, like what was your bill at like Costco this past
Yeah,
week? And so it's really easy for our weekly habits where we're thinking about filling up at the gas station, going to the grocery store. Like, I think that the general populace, especially, we'll talk more about like gas here in the Pacific Northwest and like what that means and looks like. Yeah, we're certainly feeling the steepness of that line. Whereas with some other things where we're, like let's say your items that you're purchasing less frequently, that we're not feeling that as much, but it's also not as much in our face.
yeah, 100%. And I think like inflation is just like a measurement of like it seems like it's almost one thing, but it's like a thousand small pieces like moving through like the system and ultimately like
Yes.
our checkbooks. Absolutely. Interesting that like inflation jumped up this week because what was also newsworthy just in that realm of just like things getting more expensive is Apple raising prices on all of their products.
Okay. Of course they
And
did.
so say it again.
I said, of course they did.
Of course they did. I know. Very, very convenient time. I mean, but I think this like connects a lot of things, right? It's like we've got the AI, we've got the chips factor, we've got the
Mm.
supply chains, and then also ultimately like consumer all in one place. Um, and I think like on the AI pieces, there's been this big demand for chips. And this is ultimately what Apple is saying is part of the reason why they're increasing their prices is like in the supply and demand world, there's a lot of demand for these chips.
Yeah.
And in order for Apple to continue to provide these products, they have to increase their prices. Whether that's actually in reality or a convenient storyline for them to increase their prices
Yes.
is not probably for me to say, but a big impact there. So a lot of their products are increasing by a couple $100 a piece. I know that their stock took quite the plummet once they noted that, and so yeah, it's interesting to think that like you would think like AI and the impact on inflation is not necessarily like the robot showing up at your front door and taking over like the Amazon delivery guy, but is more like the higher price tag on like the MacBook Pro or the iPod. I almost said iPod Nano, but that's going to date me a little bit.
I mean, an interesting thing about that too is it's like, is this just rationalizing like CapEx spending within these
Yeah.
companies? I was having a conversation with a company we work with here locally who's a big supplier to Intel. And I
Mm.
was and I was like, okay, Intel stock price, we'll throw this up in the charts, is like going through the roof over the last like 3 months, 6 months, et cetera. Like, what's that done to you as a supplier for Intel?
Yeah.
And the organization was like, like currently zero. Like they're
Yeah.
in this place of like, this is all about the future and like what can potentially happen with what Intel is going to do and how like they're going to be this massive supplier from a chip standpoint. But here, no actual benefit to a mega supplier of Intel where they're just saying like, hey, this is a like future state. It's coming
Yeah.
from a supply standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, I think you mentioned like the difference between like core inflation and just normal PCE. When you think about like the delineator there of like the oil prices, like how do you feel like that ultimately kind of impacts the bottom line number for inflation?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that from that perspective, we're looking at like, okay, not only gas of us
Mhm.
going and filling up at the tank, but also think about going and just global supply chain. So whether it's like, okay, we have to getting something overseas, getting something, both you and I are tracking like number of ships through the Strait of Hormuz on a daily basis. I mean, it's a big piece of that, and it's also like it's just in front of our face, and it's always a reminder about like, oh, here's the price of fuel for someone living in Indiana versus Oregon versus Hawaii versus et cetera, and just the delineation there too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even at a micro level, it's like the blueberries coming from Hood River, right?
Yeah,
Like it
yeah.
takes gas to take it from point A to point B. And I'd say, yeah, just because core inflation excludes energy, like doesn't mean like our family budgets don't. But yeah, you're right. There's this massive trickle down impact.
I'd also say too, like I feel like that when gas prices first started coming out, I remember you and your family were taking a road trip, and it's like, oh, this is
An
happening.
ill-timed road
Yeah,
trip, an
yeah, this
ill-timed
is
road
this
trip.
is just in time for like spring break travel, summer
Yeah,
travel too. So, I'm sure if you put the pie chart on like miles driven by family, like by month, like
yeah,
it's a disproportional amount, call it May through October, at
yeah.
least here in the Pacific Northwest. So it's going to have that kind of size effect on it as well.
Absolutely. Kids are out for summer. People are wanting to go see do. We live in the Pacific Northwest for a reason, right? We
Yep.
want to go explore the beautiful places that we call home. Maybe on that note, gas prices.
Okay.
I know that I think like gas prices obviously like, are a big part of the inflation number. But I'm curious, do you know what the average, and I've got the number in front of me right now,
Okay.
the average cost for a gallon of gas in the state of Oregon? It's going to be a
Right
little bit
now.
different from like the Portland metro area
Okay.
to other places, but in the state of Oregon, what do you have?
Let's go state of Oregon right now. I don't know, $5.05.
Ooh, ooh, a little bit under 4.7. Yeah, $4.07.
$4.70.
$4.70.
Okay, I know. That's
Yeah,
some metro bias.
there's
Uh-huh.
some metro bias there. All right, if we're 470 today,
Okay.
can you guess where gas prices were 1 month ago?
Let's go 30 cents higher. So how about $5?
Ooh, 525.
Gosh, that's
525.
nice that it's come down that much.
Yes, it has. The dangerous part is if you're looking at the numbers, you see that the average cost per gallon today is 470. The national average is 386. So almost about 90 cents less than what we're paying for a gallon of gas here. So, but all of that builds on top of each other, right? And so when we
Yep.
think about like human investing, serving the folks in our backyard. It's
Hmm.
like one of our goals with this podcast is to be able to like take these like macro level like pieces and to bring it like locally.
Yes.
You had a great idea, which I love, like the nod to Portlandia is like put a bird on it, is being able to call the segment that.
Yes.
But when we look at the inflation numbers here locally, is we've seen some like higher prints for inflation. So CPI, which is a little bit of a different read, is up 3.5% year over year in May, which was
Okay.
also the same last month as well. Um, and so that includes gas prices. And so it's been up pretty high. And we'll share a chart about this from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But one thing that it does note is that inflation in all the other categories has gone down a little bit. Um, and so I think it's just a good reminder that not all prints for inflation are felt the same. But I think we can all stack hands on things are getting more expensive. I also think that the thing that people forget, and when I talk to investors about inflation, that this is true, is like we see these numbers of 3%, 4%, and sometimes that like is held inside of like a vacuum. But I
Mhm.
think in reality, it's like we need to remember that just like our portfolios, inflation compounds.
Yes.
And so, which is one of the greatest challenges for us as an investor. And so when you've got a basket of groceries for $100 and that basket goes to $108 and then rose by another 4%, now you're like, it's not going to be 112, but it's going to be like 112 and 32 cents. And so like
Mhm.
those small like growth attached to inflation can ultimately just like erode our purchasing power, which is one of the greatest challenges there.
I think about our financial planning software where if we put in somebody like, okay, their retirement expenses in the year 2027 are $100,000, and
Yeah,
we throw a 3% inflation number on that, and then we're showing them those expenses in 2042, people are always surprised what 3% on $100,000 grows to over time.
absolutely, absolutely. And so, yeah, just even yeah, in 1 year versus extrapolated over a long-term period of time is it can be pretty eye-opening. So making sure your assumptions are correct in your Excel spreadsheet or your financial planning tools
Yeah,
is
critical.
integral. So that's great. When when we think about like local inflation, I know there's been some other newsworthy items just about like how do we combat that, and like ultimately how does like Oregon and the Pacific Northwest like look to like take care of their people to combat inflation?
Yeah, so I mean, we had news come out that coming up here this week with minimum wage rising. So we have that rising by 50 cents an hour across Oregon. But then also we have in the metro region for $14.55 an hour rising to 16.80. So that's in the Portland area. What's also interesting with that, Will, is that we see that only about 4% of workers right now are receiving minimum wage
Hmm.
compared to, like, let's think about a pre-pandemic number of around 7% of all workers were receiving minimum wage in 2017. So I view that as a positive trend. Like, I know that it'll be interesting to see just, oh, okay, is like 1455 to 1680 is a pretty significant jump.
Yeah,
But like how does that flow through? Like I don't view a necessarily insert store or insert company, raise, is this going to lead to raising prices by in the same way? Because this is going to flow down to individual businesses too. I don't think so. But it'll
hmm,
be interesting just to see like how this, this is a pretty significant jump, which is awesome for those workers that are trying to, find meaningful ways to work and live and all of those
yeah.
things. But yeah, I thought that this was interesting just as we're talking about general inflation, that we saw this come across via Oregon Live as well.
Absolutely. I just punched into my calculator what 50 cents over 1680 is, which is
Yeah.
the new number for minimum wage. And it's just below 3%. So from a
Yeah.
cost of living adjustment, it's like right in line with what most folks are getting from their employers as well.
Yeah.
So I feel like that diminishes that number just a little bit more.
Yeah,
But
I would agree.
the good news is just from an inflationary standpoint, purchasing power is going to continue to increase for those that the 4% that are receiving minimum wage. Um, yeah, Andrew, some funny parts. One of the funny parts of the weekend was getting a text from you. And so on Saturday there was monsoon rains, there was thunder and lightning, and I got an interesting note from you about a local sports. Can we call him a sports star? An athlete made the news. You want to
Yeah.
share with us what that text was about?
Yeah. I would say that the Pacific Northwest gets a bit of a bad rap when we get weather that's like outside one standard of deviation of normal. We get really, so that could be a half an inch of snow.
Hmm.
There was like a tornado cloud like above like Malala, but we also saw some lightning. My wife's a huge fan of thunderstorms, so we were
Yeah,
definitely like outside, kind of underneath our deck, peeking around, seeing what was going on.
that's great.
And then I saw KGW posted that someone at Oregon Golf Club out in West Lynn got struck by lightning. So this was someone who was playing golf by themselves, and they're okay, stable condition. We'll lead with that. But they were playing by themselves, got struck by lightning, kind of came to and was able to call 911.
Unreal.
So that feels kind of out of a movie. Um,
Yeah,
but so this got us thinking, a phrase that we use in our office is corner case.
yeah.
And corner case is basically like something that is very low probability of occurring.
Mm,
So something that we were thinking about is, okay, what are the odds of getting struck by lightning? So over the course of your lifetime, it's about, sorry, over the course of a given year, it's about 1.22 million. So, super, super low.
yeah.
This got me thinking back to what we were talking about last week And
Hmm.
also another chart that will come up where it's like, okay, like let's think about getting struck by lightning and how what that means in terms of picking a stock that's like a huge winner. Like what's the odds of that happening? So as a reminder, about 4% of companies listed over the duration of the last 100 years of the stock market have basically provided like all the value. So super low odds. And then we
Yeah.
get to thinking like, let's think of some of the companies that have performed best over the last 20 years. And what are the odds of choosing one of those top 10 companies, whether it be an NVIDIA, an Applied Materials, Amazon, something like that? And back of the napkin, we were thinking it was about 1 in 30,000. And I'd add in with behavior, it's probably way less.
Yeah, yeah. So what's this? I immediately my mind goes to like, so you're saying there's a chance, right?
You're
Uh,
you're saying there's a chance. Yeah, we're like we get people who will sometimes equate investing in the stock market to gambling.
yeah,
And we're always able to come back with some excellent charts of like, oh, your odds of growing your money in the stock market going up in a given year is like 75%.
yeah,
Really like the reverse of gambling. Choosing an individual stock that's going to be this like top performer, I think we get into like that type of conversation of trying to pick those winners.
yeah. No, which is a dangerous and slippery slope when you see like the some of these companies that have 10x'd over the last period of time. But yeah, I know that we our household is pretty excited about the lightning strikes, and I love this segment here of like what does it actually take to pick? And you're right, behaviorally, it's a completely different game because when you see
Yeah.
a stock go up 100%, like your intuition is to push sell. Or like for other people, it's to be able to like hold on and like you maybe have missed out on your opportunity to sell as you see that stock plummets afterwards. So no, that's great. Well, Andrew, one of the things that we like to end our podcast about is just like local recommendations.
Yes.
Yeah, being able to yeah give people shout outs in our own backyard of places that we've like grown to love. You shared with me your recommendation before, and I want you to I would love for you to start because I think it's incredible, and I've always been interested in this. And so, Andrew, what's your local recommendation?
Okay. I had a really cool opportunity. This was like a week ago, or maybe a week and a half ago. We have had a client here who it's been their dream. They've had this lot at the beach forever. We're doing some scenarios for them, and so they went for it and they've built their dream beach house, which is awesome. So I was able to go and drive out there to the beach. And typically, when our family goes to the beach, a lot of times we go to Gearhart. That's our one of our spots that we go to, and I don't know what milepost it's at. I'm looking at it right now. Okay, milepost 28. So if you're familiar with driving out Highway 26 towards the coast, you have kind of Camp 18 as your mile marker. But
Yeah.
before that, you'll always see people just filling up massive jugs of water.
And I've
And
always wondered, like, well, what's the deal with
and
the
so
water
I know,
jets?
and at least in our family, like we never have time to like we're not stopping. We're like
Yeah,
halfway melting down as we get to that point in the car ride. And so like my wife and I have looked this up before. So this is the Sunset Springs Fountain. This is an
okay,
iconic roadside springs near milepost 28. So I've driven there, I don't know, hundreds of times,
yeah,
never stopped. But I had like some time, and so I made the stop and I stopped and I had my, like water bottle and I filled it up with Sunset Springs water. Pretty good. Pretty good. Life changing to fill up like gallons and gallons. Like
yeah.
I don't know if I'd go there. But pretty good. So it was a cool opportunity just to have a minute that I would never normally do.
I love it.
I actually thought of this segment when doing it because I was like, okay,
Yeah,
this is something that I feel like people, maybe if you're anything like me, have seen people doing
I've
this.
always been curious. Yeah, although like I kind of was hoping that that story would be like dot 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 and fill in the blank ailment was like cured. But maybe you have to fill up gallons as opposed to just a single water bottle. I love it. Well, my segment is our family. So our kids are 8 and 5 right now. We're trying to like increase the miles that our kids are able to ride their bike.
Mm,
And so we took our bikes down to Shampooey State Park,
yes.
right alongside the Willamette River, and tried to put in some miles. And so we got our kids up to 8 miles, which was fun. But as a part of the incentive structure for that was we rode our bikes from Shampooey to the Butteville store. And for those that haven't been to the Butteville General Store, I almost don't want to share this segment because it was one of my favorite experiences. Great sandwiches, but even better ice cream. So shout out to Butteville General Store for making maybe the best ice cream in.
Do they make it there themselves, or is it
They
is
they
it
make it there themselves. Yeah, and I need
wow.
to do some more research about who does it, but it's they advertise it as like two brothers that are making this ice cream themselves, and the four of us in our family all stacked hands on best ice cream ever, and so there's a countdown clock for when we can go again. So the recommendation is twofold. This one is like to get some exercise, get out, to
Mhm.
be able to see a really beautiful place. I've never been to Shampooey. And two is Butteville General Store, which I had never been to as well. I hope to go back soon. But hopefully this recommendation doesn't get make it too popular for us. But
I think that's a goal. Like if we stick it with this for as long as we want to,
yeah,
maybe we'll start to get some like, oh, like lines at Butteville store post high ground post have are out the door.
I think we're a long way from there. But
Yeah, yeah.
I'll take a free ice cream cone. How about that from
There we
Butteville
go.
for the recommendation? All right, Andrew, this was a good one. Good sesh.
Okay, really good sesh.
Yeah,
Yeah, excited to see we got a couple more days to the end of the quarter. We'll come back in a couple weeks and see what we've got to talk about.
that's perfect. Thanks everyone for listening today.
Take care.